Greg, it's great to be back on the show again for our show today, which is exploring social selling and your article that came out that got, what was it, 20,000 hits on LinkedIn? You
Yeah,
want
around
to
that.
share the title of that?
Sure. It's actually the title was "Social Selling is about opening, not closing," and it got about 22,000 views on LinkedIn. A couple thousand people shared it, and is actually one of the top social selling posts on LinkedIn. And it was totally unexpected to see it kind of perform like that. So, but very exciting. But we had talked and figured we'd put together some things around this topic and see what we can come up with today. So, by the way, if this is kind of a follow-up to our live Hangout on air that we had done too, which I goofed up because I didn't start it as a Hangout on air. I started it as a private Hangout. So first of all, thank you to all those who did attend the private Hangout. Now this is the live one, so we'll take and get this one down. This is actually what you're hearing. For those who are watching or listening, it's basically what we had talked about before. There were some other questions that kind of came in. We're going to touch on those as well. And then, so if you're listening to this on a podcast or watching this on YouTube, awesome. Thank you very much for checking this out.
Great, Greg. And let's talk about this. This show is sponsored by our social selling on LinkedIn to drive sales at NC State Technology Training Solutions. You'll see a link about that at the bottom of the screen. So make sure to check that out, and love to have you in the class with 6 hours of training, workbook, and a certificate of completion from NC State Technology Training Solutions. So thank you. Excited to have that course. So let's start with the opening of your article. What occurred, comments you've gotten, and take it from there, Greg.
Yeah, I got a whole bunch of different input back from the article. A lot of folks that were, they loved the perspective because basically what I asked people to do was to ask, why is sales always focused on closing? And actually referenced the Glenn Ross movie from 1992 with Alec Baldwin and a number of other great actors in there, Ed Harris and a few other guys. I think Al Pacino was in there too. But basically, there's a scene in the movie where Alec Baldwin is talking about ABC always be closing, and those days, it maybe it's not so relevant today. And back in '92. Hotmail hadn't even come out yet. So, and the internet wasn't exactly what it is today. Google didn't exist, So, so sales was a very aggressive approach. There was, you always had to be taking and closing something, whether it's closing an appointment or closing on a go-no-go date or, closing the sale. And I think today we have to take a step back and say, hey, hold on a second. We have the rest of the company, whether it's support or marketing or PR or accounts payable, accounts receivable, all those other folks that are working to keep accounts open. But why is sales closing? Why is sales thinking backwards? In essence, while they think closing is opening, it's very weird. So, what I'm suggesting in the article basically is, why don't we rethink how we're approaching sales? Think of it as opening the door, creating new relationships, opening up opportunities, opening meetings, opening on a go-no-go date, those sort of things. And think about things in opening, which is a much more positive approach to sales as opposed to thinking about closing everything. And it's a different perspective. It's going to take a little bit of time for sales to kind of rethink things a little bit, but we'll see what happens.
Well, let's start with just looking at something as practical as the LinkedIn profile, because you and I have been involved with it, I think, LinkedIn since probably about 2005 or 6, if we really go back to our start of working with it. And it's evolved as social selling's evolved, so they've started adding new features to LinkedIn and opportunities, and not everyone's taken advantage of that. So, Greg, let's start with, what would a sales professional's LinkedIn profile look like now if it's more focused on social selling?
Sure. So we've been looking at LinkedIn. A lot of folks actually look at LinkedIn as this is where your resume exists. And when we think resume, normally we think about getting a job and how we look to the potential employer or to an HR representative or something along those lines. And basically my argument is that, well, if you're not looking for a job, why does your LinkedIn profile look like you are looking for a job? So why, who are you selling to? You have prospective clients and others out there who are actually looking at your profile, just trying to figure out who you are. But if they see things in your LinkedIn profile that say, that you excessively, achieve your quota, you're always making your numbers every single month, and always making the President's Club every single year, and those sort of things, what does that really say about how you contribute to the success of your customers? So what we say here is basically go back and let's rethink the profile. Let's think about how you present yourself to customers, because you already have a job. Now you actually have to take and close or open new business. So see, I'm even getting stuck on the whole closing thing. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're
I want to. This is so important because so few miss this. Is that you've got a tool out here with what is it? Close to 300 million business professionals globally. That in a world where the customer wants to check you out, wants secondary validation, wants to pre-screen you, doing their research on the web, and this thing is a more controlled environment, so it's easier to manage for someone than a Facebook page. And to me, it's part of your digital reflection, to reference Andy Beale's book, and a view on the web of your first impression. And if you go into your sales call with your resume in hand to talk to a new prospect, that's kind of what many LinkedIn profiles look like today, don't they?
Yeah, and you say that, you're thinking, it makes me think, if you present your resume to a customer, are you explaining why your employer hired you, or are you explaining why your customer should be hiring you? So I mean, think about it in that perspective. So what should be done in a LinkedIn profile is you need to discuss how you help your customers become successful, how you bring value to your customers, not how you bring value to your employer. Forget your employer, you're already working. So how do you bring value to your customers? What do you do to contribute into the industry? How are you a good salesperson? Okay, you're not a good salesperson if all you do is just close all the time. You need to actually, today, you need to bring value into your customers' world, because basically when you think about how people decide to buy things, especially in a B2B environment, the one thing that everyone is afraid of when they're buying something is whether or not they're going to succeed with it or get fired because they bought it. Mm-hmm. So let's keep that in mind. So you need to show and give that confidence to a potential buyer, and that starts with your profile and your persona and how you take and contribute to the success of your customers.
And the biggest thing here is, let's say you're working your sales quota and you're worried you're going to get laid off. Well, my gosh, you're going to be more positioned for the next job being in your PowerPoint as presenting education and resources on your LinkedIn profile than if you just made it look like a boring resume. And now we have all these sections to add content on. We're going to talk a little bit about that related to social selling and than ever before. I mean, you can add content to almost all the major areas of your LinkedIn profile. So the next thing I want to talk about in contrast is what should they not be on a salesperson's LinkedIn profile, and take it away, Greg.
Yeah. So basically, things that should not be inside your profile are going to be, try not to use buzzwords. And LinkedIn kind of helps you out with this by showing. You basically every year they come out with the buzz term by country, and what are people putting in their profiles? Like, is everyone proficient in a particular skill or something along those lines? When the reason why you want to avoid using those buzzwords is because basically everybody is using them, so it doesn't really differentiate yourself. Especially if you put things like consistency. Well, if you're Well, you better be consistent if you have a job. If you're consistently,
So far,
closing deals or things like that. I, so Yeah, so I mean, think about that right there. Why would you use those kind of terms in your profile? You better be consistent, but we better be able to figure it out before looking at your profile. So don't waste your space on your LinkedIn profile by using buzzwords. So go back and check the LinkedIn blog, and as soon as the next report comes out for 2014 or 2015. We'll also put it up on linkedintosales.com. So that's one thing, is avoid the buzzwords.
how go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say the other thing is don't put crappy, profile pictures in your LinkedIn profile. Get a good picture. It doesn't have to be a professional headshot if you don't want it to be. Sometimes some of these cameras out there are really good. Just get a good background and take a picture and put it up there. But if you're in a more elevated position, seriously consider if you do large sales, like $1 million sales, and you probably want spend a little bit of money to get a professional photographer to go take your pictures.
How can social sellers use social networks to listen? Because that's, to me, an important shift from me just hitting the phone and calling as many people as possible and knocking on as many doors.
Yeah.
It really is a sort of a dialogue that begins and listening.
Yeah, so this addresses how do you listen for buying signals. So what should you be listening for on social networks? So there's a number of different ways. You can either listen through activity streams, watch particular conversations that are happening, whether it's hashtags or people just asking questions about your products or competitor products. Those sort of things are kind of easy to find. One thing you do want to do is make sure that you go into your LinkedIn settings and make sure you have your notifications all turned on, especially if you're in sales. Because if you find out that maybe you're in the middle of a sales engagement and then all of a sudden the guy you're working with no longer works there, which I'm sure has happened to a bunch of people out there, you probably want to get notified about it within a reasonable amount of time. LinkedIn also made an acquisition not too long ago of Newsly, and what Newsly does is actually tells you who in your network has made the news. I've been using it for a number of years. I'm really excited about this integration because if they could take and bring that information into LinkedIn, that'd be even better. Because then now you have an opportunity to take and congratulate folks for participating or for getting in the news. So another thing you can do, use social monitoring tools. In the previous cast we had, people are asking what are some free or some really affordable solutions that you can use. Hootsuite, it's free for a certain number of accounts, or you can use pay $10 and get pretty much unlimited number of accounts in there. There's also a few others that cost a little bit more per month, and then there's social CRM, which can help you with monitoring, like Nimble, nimble.com, which I know you like. They have a signals tool inside there that will give you some information about your social networks that you might be able to react to.
And we're going to have a show on this later, but a social CRM is basically like, it's almost for the old school, it's like having a Rolodex that goes out and looks up what's going on and updates itself dynamically for you off of changes on the web and goes, oh, Bob Jones just mentioned you on Twitter, and Betty just wished you a happy birthday on Facebook, and others. So that's, to me, whole nother territory we'll talk about on another show.
Yeah.
The next thing I wanted to ask is, what are some examples of social selling buying signals or social buying signals?
Sure. Things like mentions from people who may not be using your product. They could be just referring and saying, hey, I found this really cool solution out here for this. There's also, listening for those questions that kind of fit into how you can answer. How you can answer those particular questions that people are putting out. If it's related to a product or solving a particular problem, you could definitely contribute to that. And then also listening out for referrals. So if somebody says, someone asks a question, somebody else answers it, and then they reference you or your solution, then that would be a great example of something to kind of listen for. The thing though to keep in mind about signals is that your first message to somebody who has mentioned or made a referral or something along those lines should not be a pitch. And there's too many folks, too much noise out there about people just kind of pitching all the time. Avoid the pitch. Don't sell with the pitch. So basically, what you should be looking to do is contribute to the conversation and actually start it out with, hey, I'm familiar with this particular, with this industry. What kind of issues are you having? We have a number of customers that may have had a, similar issue. I'd love to, help you find the direction you want to go in. And, leave it up to them to kind of figure it out. But it's a soft pitch. It's not even really a pitch, but just kind of, don't go say, hey, we've solved 100 of our clients' problems that that the same problem you have. We got a whole bunch of customers over here. Come on over here and join them. Can I send you a proposal? You don't do that in your first pitch.
Another question I hear is, where do I find content to share? And to me, the question before it is, do I really understand who my customer is, what the persona of them is, what some you call it avatar of it is? So that's the beginning step in determining where do I find content to share. And I'm really against the share so many times a day because there's so much noise out there. But let's start with, where do I find content to share?
Sure. Content is critical in the social selling process, because what content does is help customers navigate the buying process. And as a salesperson, you need to know what content should be placed in front of that prospect at the right time. So everything is timing. If it's too early in the buying process, then sending a data sheet probably wouldn't be the best thing. But if they're still trying to figure out if you're the right solution for it, maybe you want to send them a general white paper or possibly a case study. But it all kind of depends on where they are during the buying process. So you can find content. The first place I would look for finding content, if you have a marketing department, is look to them for content. Generally, they're putting case studies and blog posts into your company blog. I would strongly suggest using that as a resource. Other places you can look at using Clout, using Hootsuite, finding content. Actually, LinkedIn's got a pretty good email that goes out every morning about what your network has just shared. Twitter does the same thing too. Those are great places to find content that will take and engage your audience and help build your professional brand and potentially even close the sale.
Related to that question is the question, what is an effective approach to sharing content? And the point to add there to me is quality over quantity. I think our tolerance for useless noise is, we're becoming less and less tolerant of it. But Greg, what's your views on it?
Yeah, I think that with sharing content, my approach is to take a 70-20-10 approach, and 70% of the content is going to be relevant to the followers. If folks are following me to learn more about social media and social selling, then I'm going to take and share content that's related to that, and then I might occasionally find something that's a little bit different to include out there just to kind of test the waters. 20% of the content that you're sharing should be that of your companies. So it could be a blog post, it could be a white paper, it could be just some other video, anything like that, a podcast, any of that information, take and put it out there and share it with them. And then 10% is what you find engaging. So your followers have to learn a little bit more about you, and what makes you tick, other than the 70% of the content you're sharing that help interest them, help them get to know you with that 10% of the content. So if you're a Yankees baseball fan, for example, share something about an awesome play that maybe Derek Jeter did, or something along those lines, right? What it was the awesome play at short that he made. That it might be a quick 15-second video that you could share. Just some simple stuff like that.
And then in our private initial hangout, someone asked a good question about sharing across platforms and our views on that. And
Sure.
I'm going to throw my 2 cents out on it. I really want you to slow down and think of, who am I speaking to? Is this relevant? If they're listening to all the channels, what would be the impact to me if I had that? Do I want to share it at different times? Do I want to add a curated comment with it, because on another platform this might be needed? And then how fast the gear is turning. Like we talk about in LinkedIn, it's not as fast, the feed, or big to look at as Twitter. So, Greg, add your 2 cents to that.
Yeah, well, I think every social network has a different pace in which things work at. Twitter obviously is much faster than LinkedIn, which is faster than Google Plus, and then faster, and then Facebook. We don't know how fast it goes because they don't show us everything. So unless unless you're paying to push content forward. So what I would do is, your strategy has got to be based on the speed of your networks. Tweets generally have a life of about 2 minutes, but that doesn't say go tweet every 2 minutes. So what you want to do is, to kind of develop, if you're prospecting, kind of, make sure that you're putting out content that's relevant to the following you have on the social networks. And then also, test for frequency. And the way you test for frequency is just measure engagement based on the times that you're sharing content, and using tools like Hootsuite to take and schedule that, and then schedule your posts, and then analyze the results from those will help you, get a better understanding of when is the best time to take and put out content like this.
I can hear people saying, when would I have time for this? And the answer is, if you're narrowing this down and understanding where are your customers looking and relating, that becomes more effective in your use of time.
Yeah, I think the important thing here that we're kind of saying, but let's kind of just put it directly out there. You have to test.
Yeah.
It's plain and simple. You have got to test, and you have got to measure the results from those tests. You have to sit down, take the time to do it, because once you figure it out, it's going to be smooth sailing from there.
Yep. How should someone use social networks to build their professional brand?
This is kind of important. It's a question that does come up quite a bit. Using professional networks to, you not only have to build the brand of the company that you're working for, but you have to also build your own. I think you got to sit down and decide what social networks do you want to focus on to build your professional brand. What I would suggest is that LinkedIn has got to be your network for building professional brand, and then possibly Twitter. And it's okay to have multiple accounts of Twitter. Have a personal one for yourself if you want to. If you want to tweet out what you see on a TV show, if you're watching The Voice or something like that. And then there's also, have one for work, but make sure you check the policies at work for using your company name in a username. You have to check on that, make sure marketing is okay with it, and if it's your business, of course, do what you want. So figure out from there what kind of content is relevant to the audience you have out there. Personally, I share very little professional stuff on my LinkedIn. I'm sorry, on my Facebook network, but I'll share pictures of my kids and things like that. That's because who I'm connected to on Facebook is mainly friends and family that know me on a personal level rather than a professional level. So I think social helps you with kind of defining you're putting a boundary between your professional and personal lives, and having these options out there are pretty nice to have.
The other thing is understanding we have the business persona and presence, brand, but we also have our own, and I'm still finding people who don't realize the importance of having intentional content out there as your professional identity. And that's where, of course, as we talk in the class, of the use of the LinkedIn blogs or videos or other content on your page can really add to that personally. And I just recommended a marketing to somebody, and he said, well, that's his personal profile, and there's nothing about him or why he's qualified with it. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really interesting. It was almost like he had used the personal profile for his business, and he had said he hadn't gotten a lot of direct sales with it. Well, of course, he didn't have a lot of direct information for them to get. So that's, to me, another point. Another point is the idea of, from this conversation, it realized in the statement, I didn't get any direct sales from it, the value of secondary validation on LinkedIn and using it intentionally. Would you talk a little bit about that as well?
Sure. And if I think we had maybe mentioned this a little bit before, but I think that if how they attribute a lead how they measure, how they've acquired a lead. It really depends on what they attribute a conversion to. So in marketing speak, that basically means is who is the first. It could mean who was the first person that touched, or what was the first source that prospect touched your information with. So if it was on LinkedIn and there was a status update you put out there and they commented on it, are you actually attributing that comment to the success of eventually closing that customer? So I think that's one way to kind of look at it from a bigger standpoint, especially with larger organizations that have sophisticated marketing systems put in place. Deciding where to attribute the social network to the sale is kind of important. But for smaller businesses, this is definitely an interesting issue because you have a brand identity issue. If you're setting up your LinkedIn profile to show yourself as also the business owner, well, you have to figure out how to be one personality with your business, or don't.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a choice that you have to face. I faced it. Between linking the triangle and myself, I wanted to make sure that, with linking the triangle, for example, it was more about, I wanted to make sure that it was about the community and it wasn't about me.
Mm-hmm.
So same thing goes with your business. There's a very, very good book out there called The E-Myth, and I think you've read it.
Yeah,
well.
Absolutely. We speak of it in our class.
Yeah, the E-Myth is an excellent book, but it speaks to the fact that, if you're a small business owner, did you create yourself a job or did you create yourself a business? And do you have the systems put in place in order to take and grow a business? And is your business the product that you're working on developing? And are those systems put in place so that way you can eventually walk away after you sell the business and feel comfortable about going out and starting another business? So that's a brand identity problem, and it definitely helps if you can figure that out as you're doing social selling as well. It'll be less confusing.
One other question to me is the obvious thing, but does social selling stop after you open a new account? Where does it stop? And
no, I don't think it does.
No.
I think social selling keeps on going. Let's not assume that social selling is only meant for sales. Social selling applies across the organization. It's as much about acquisition as it is about retention. Because if you're in a whether you're a small business or a multinational enterprise, you have other products that you can sell. You have other services you can offer. And it may not be selling directly to the person who bought the first time, but it could be, they could be referring within the organization, and you want social selling to help out with that because it makes it much easier to take and close the sale. But social is using digital tools in order to take and help, facilitate the sale, and that doesn't mean that you can't figure out who's in another department that you can reach out to, that you can ask your prospective or your client if you can get the referral to that person or at least a recommendation. So I would say based on social selling just keeps on going.
Well, this is part of what we wanted to do, Greg, is to continue and open the conversation around social selling is about opening, not closing. And so I would love to hear people's comments below. What else do they want to know? But I also want to tell them about some other cool stuff we have. Of course, as we mentioned, this show is sponsored by our course at NC State Technology Training Solution, and it's called Social Selling with LinkedIn to Drive Sales. We have specific things to do. We have a workbook. We have a 6 hours of in-classroom going over information, walking out with real measurable results. So I want to mention that. And we have talk about our podcast show and how they can hear it.
Sure, no problem. Well, so I'll probably, hopefully, you're seeing my screen right now, and you'll see the information about the class. If you go out to linkingintosales.com and click on training, then underneath there you'll see classroom training in the drop-down menu. Just go to there, and you'll find this page that talks about where you can take and find and sign up for the course at NC State. This is an on-site course. It's August 26th and 27th, 2014. from 6 to 9 o'clock in the evening. And you'll walk out of there with a certificate of completion from NC State, their technology training solutions group. So make sure you at least check it out and see if it's something that you can convince the boss to pay for.
Yeah, or yourself.
Or do it yourself. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it will. You'll walk out of there with some really great information, and it's something you can definitely take and put in your LinkedIn profile that you've completed social selling training at NC State. So there's if you're watching the video, obviously you see this on YouTube. YouTube channel is youtube.com/linkingsales, and we'll explain why the URL is like that in a later episode. Once again, we learn things by doing. So you can find the podcast on Twitter and on Stitcher, as well as on TuneIn, and Player FM. So we got 4 different networks that we take and push this out to. You can also listen to it on the website at linkingintosales.com and click on podcast to listen to that. Follow us on Twitter, join our LinkedIn group. Just use Linking Into Sales and you will find us. Or just go out to linkintosales.com, look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll find all our social icons. Very easy, very, very easy to access.
Sounds good. Well, Greg, another fun get-together here, and we love hearing from you all. Let us know what you like, what you want to know about, maybe someone to interview, because we're set up now with the podcast so we can do Hangouts on air with people anywhere in the world pretty much. So the door is open, right?
Right, absolutely. Before we go, if you leave a comment in this post, okay, whether it's here on the blog post, if it's on YouTube, if it's tweet us out. If you checked out this episode, let us know if you liked it. If you leave me a comment and all that stuff, I have an upcoming ebook that I'm going to be taking and putting out on Amazon here pretty soon about social selling. It'll be done in the next month or so. But I'm going to take and actually give you a free copy of that. I will send it to you. Absolutely free.
Wow.
Just give me a copy.
What an offer!
Right. So hey, it's going to be about a 100-page ebook, that you can take and load it up on your Kindle and go from there. I'll personally send it to you with an email, and then also love to get your feedback on it too. But leave a comment. It doesn't matter if it's on the blog or if it's on YouTube or if it's a tweet or something like that. Put it out there, and I'll get you a copy of the book.
Sounds great, Greg. Well, you all have a wonderful day, and may you open as many doors as possible that leads to great revenue in sales.
All right. You all have a great one.